Hey everybody, how are things in our pajama-clad prisons? I took a week to decompress and set up a plan as to how I want to ramp up production and also play over 50 hours of Kenshi. Oh, and I learned that my coffee machine's percolator fits perfectly in the opening of a large lemonade pitcher I have, so now I'm cold brewing coffee 2 gallons at a time. I'm feeling really awesome all of the time. We'll get to that Kenshi video and me phasing through walls later though. Today we're going to talk about something that a considerable amount of people don't even acknowledge the existence of, and I didn't even know about myself until I did some digging for that big Command & Conquer video a couple years back. Jeez, it's been 2 years since that one now. Okay, for those of you that already know what I'm talking about, please mentally prepare yourselves because I'm gonna say it. You ready? Too bad. Command & Conquer 4. While Command & Conquer Rivals was overwhelmingly panned for defiling the once great series, Rivals wasn't the thing that killed Command & Conquer, or at least put it in a long-standing coma to be revived when EA wants to attempt a remaster. Command & Conquer 4 effectively took a series that was starting to have issues keeping up with the current RTS landscape, which itself wasn't doing all that well because StarCraft 2 hadn't quite made the scene yet, and basically buried it. Command & Conquer 4 was effectively the end of all things Command & Conquer for the next 8 years before the mobile game came out, which is arguably worse than nothing at all. This wasn't like a Brood War to Wings of Liberty-esque, we're just waiting for the right tech and right ideas type gap. This was a, oh crap, we have so irredeemably screwed things up that there's no way a game in this series will sell after this at all gap in games. It's one thing to be a game that is so bad that you're always getting dunked on for YouTube bait, but it's an entirely different thing when a game is so poorly received that few fans of the series are even willing to acknowledge its existence. To give the blissfully ignorant an idea of what's so bad about Command & Conquer 4, let's talk about the not so good, the very bad, and the ugly EA-isms that make up Command & Conquer 4.
Base under attack.
Let's start at the beginning. Even before the development of Command & Conquer 4, things weren't going so well for not Westwood EA Los Angeles when it came to the Command & Conquer franchise. According to key people, Command & Conquer's brand image was being leveraged to help keep the studio going since other properties weren't doing well enough to carry their own weight, which resulted in titles having breakneck development times. Of all the EA LA Command & Conquer titles, the one that got the longest amount of time at 18 months start to finish was Red Alert 3, but they also had to spend a lot of that precious time making a console port for some reason. I personally don't think it's ever really been a good idea to put a game like an RTS onto a controller setup, but people keep on insisting on doing it for some reason. With all that in mind, CNC4's development was an utter nightmare at 13 months. Heck, it wasn't even supposed to be a part of the Tiberium timeline to begin with, but they slapped together a story at the last minute when they realized what they had wasn't going to sell. Command & Conquer 4 was originally Command & Conquer Arena and was intended for Asian markets only, and was supposed to be a multiplayer-only experimental RTS that just happened to have the Command & Conquer name attached to it for brand recognition. When this idea didn't look like it was going to print them a bunch of money, it eventually morphed into Command & Conquer 4 Tiberian Twilight. This wasn't even an informed decision by any developers, but was instead an out-and-out example of executive meddling with what was, at least from an outsider's perspective, seemed like it had zero informed decision-making behind it in regards to what kept people coming to the series or the realities of making a game on such a tight time frame, let alone adding on an entirely new element to the game that some guy on the top floor thought would be cool. Pretty much everyone who's ever publicly spoken about the development of Command & Conquer 4 has nothing nice to say about it. How bad was this development? Well, one good example of how much of a train wreck it was that the original version of Arena had plagiarized artwork. The UI artists used stills and images from the trailers of StarCraft 2 of all things in order to give the UI mock-up some pizzazz in the background. Now, some of these have Command & Conquer assets thrown into the mix to at least try and make it look like this was meant as a mock-up, but others are literally just screenshots of that Marine suit-up trailer for Wings of Liberty with a little bit of menu photoshopped on top of them. Now, as you can all tell by my thumbnails, I have no real experience in graphic design, and I definitely have no experience in UI design for video games. However, I'm fairly certain that it's a no-no to hit the print screen key on your computer and work over someone else's design in order to make yours look nice. Knowing how the art community gets over stuff like tracing or using someone else's OC, I can't help but think that this was a faux pas, especially considering that you're appropriating work from your main rival. Maybe I'm barking up the wrong tree here though, as it seems the person who pulled this stunt had no problem getting work after that and even displays it on their website to prospective clients. So like, maybe it's okay in the world of UI design? Who knows? I certainly don't. So now let's talk about the game itself in all of its horrible glory. The first big thing you're going to notice is that there's no base building or even an economy anymore, anywhere. Instead, you get your choice of 3 mobile bases that will pop out any unit you can build with no regard to tech trees or if you've got enough supplies for it. Your base thingy moves around as previously mentioned, and it's baked into the game as a core strategy. Your units might not be able to make it all the way from your spawn point if they have to run across the map, so you gotta move that gear up so that they don't have to leg it through enemy territory. Won't that put your one and only building in danger though? No, it's cool. You can respawn your base. Several times in fact per map, because that's a thing done in RTS games. You'll need to be in control of certain areas to spawn into, and you can't spawn units while moving through, so it's not all peaches and cream. The 3 modes you have are the offensive base, the defensive base, and the support base, each of which summon their own set of units. Offensive bases get offensive units. Defensive bases get turrets and crappy units. Support units get flyers. None of this matters though, as in the campaign, you'll basically use the offensive base for the entire game, except for one mission in Nod, where you have to use flyers to chase down the other guy's flying base. Other than that, it isn't going to matter much because you're just going to spew out units, move that gear up, and spew out some more units. Now, about that spewing units. Like I said earlier, there's no base building, there's no tech, there's no economy. However, in a first for the Command & Conquer series, there is now a supply cap. The supply cap is basically the beginning and end of any strategy you can have in Tiberian Twilight. Just like in pretty much every other RTS game with supply, individual units cost a certain amount of your cap, so you can't just make a bunch of the strongest unit. However, since there's no building or supply in this game, so to speak, like building farms or whatever, you start out with just as much supply on the beginning of the map as you will in the end of the map. Your only other consideration for building your army is how fast things take to build. You can queue up stuff while you're mobile and then plop yourself down to spew out a bunch of units after running away, but that'll only work in certain situations. This is a huge bummer, as half the fun of a Command & Conquer game is seeing how fast you can hoard Tiberium or gems and whatever before building a crapload of units to just bury the enemy under. Screw your whatever meta you want to do, I just want to flatten the enemy base with 25 juggernauts and a Marv. This is a proper pain because what you get at the earliest parts of a mission is also what you get at the end game, because reasons we'll talk about in the next video. If you're having trouble in the earlier parts of a tricky mission, you're not going to have any better luck later on. The story is uninspired and lacks the charm of the previous games. The Tiberium timeline might be hokey sci-fi, but who doesn't love hokey sci-fi? The entire plot is now that Kane wants to work with the GDI to get rid of all the Tiberium because reasons, but some parts of the Brotherhood don't like this, so a guy named Gideon starts a rebellion. Also, you have special eyes that only Kane himself can supply the brand you need. Also, we were the Kane that we needed to be this whole time, and that gets us shot in the end, or sets us up an assassination, depending on what side you choose. That was terrible syntax. The whole thing leads up to that screen tower we secured for Nod in the last game, and then Kane activating a portal in front of a green screen that he decides to go through to go get some smokes and a gallon of milk. Don't worry, he'll be back, guys. I hope. Please. I don't have the footage of this for reasons that we'll get into a sec, but you're not missing much. The game starts with several non-partisan missions, and then you get to choose if you want to be a GDI or Nod commander for the rest of the campaign. There's only 7 missions for each side, but if you think that means you'll play through both sides, you've got another thing coming. The ends are almost identical on both sides, and you're not missing much. You want to know why it matters even less what side you choose for your campaign? Because you can straight up switch factions between missions. No, really. If you're playing through one campaign and are now into the next one, but you're having trouble because of the stupid leveling system, you can straight up switch over to the other faction you've leveled into and have all the units for. Oh, and you heard me right. You gotta level into all your units in this game, but we'll talk about that in a sec. This doubles down for how little care was put into the campaigns, as usually a story campaign will have a set of missions that specifically caters to the strengths of the faction and helps the player explore how it works and what they can do with it before venturing out into the multiplayer with that faction. What does it say about the missions for each side of the campaign if the factions are quite literally interchangeable at the start of every mission? What does that say even about the care put in to like the factions or anything else in this game? Alrighty folks, it's time for everyone's favorite segment, the anti-sponsor. Brought to you by the nice folks who support me at patreon.com/charlatanwonder. This is the part where I talk about a sketchy offer that others might take, which I have rejected because I choose not to exploit you as questionable products and services, but instead humbly ask for your patronage and get what I get no fits thrown. This week's anti-sponsor comes from a random DM I got on Discord, saying that their company's head of growth, which sounds like you might want to get that checked out, liked my video essays, and said they wanted to sponsor one of my video essays about whatever, as long as I did a bit for their service. Real quick, let's establish 3 things here I do at the very minimum before I even start courting a potential sponsor. 1, I sniff out if you've actually bothered to look at my channel, or if you just got my email off a spreadsheet that lists my contact email, my sub count, my average viewer monthly impressions. While I can see that some people might call what I do video essays, I don't really use the term much myself, especially since I personally associate it with people trying to jazz up what are essentially video book reports. While this guy might have actually watched some of my stuff, it's still a bit suspect. 2, I will research as much as I can about you, your company, and how people who've taken deals with you in the past have fared getting the promised payment. For me, the usual red flags are if I can't find the names of any of the people you've listed on LinkedIn, or if I can't find you in any registered corporation listings, such as, say, the California Secretary of State or the Delaware registries. I only got as far as the first 2 of those things, though, because by the time I got to thing number 3, I noped right out of there. Number 3, I will research everything there is to be known about your product or service that you want me to push. What it is, how well it's received, and if it even exists yet. Especially if you do not immediately link your service to me or make it easy for me to learn about it from the get-go. This is where the noping happened. I had to do some Googling around to find out the company website's address and then sift through a lot of corporate buzzword speak to figure out what the heck their service was. The product they wanted me to push to you all would liberate the power of your PC, aka install a crypto miner. And then it would let you take back your spare processing power and make it work for you to earn awesome gamer gear, aka let them mine bitcoins, Ethereum, Fedora bucks, euphoric meme tokens, whatever the hot cryptocurrency of the moment is, and in return you'd earn those cool gamer prizes like Steam keys for AAA titles, headsets, and that sort of stuff. Sorry if I'm being vague here, the whole point of this is that I give these guys as little publicity as possible. I wasn't about to shill for a service that was going to take all the trust I've earned over the last, 8 years from you guys, and blow it when you all saw your electric bill the month after installing that cool new product that the cat avatar guy told you about. There's no way that whatever prizes you could earn would ever be enough to nullify the chunk of change you'd lose to the utility company, since you're not even the one selling the crypto, which is a volatile commodity in the first place. Not to mention that this will strain your GPU, which isn't exactly a cheap thing, and it's likely the GPU that you have is not meant for crypto, but for out-and-out gaming. It's like trying to use a supercharged V8 for the job of a plug-in hybrid. So no, this company has entered the halls of the anti-sponsors, where your product is doomed for all eternity. As usual, a big thank you to all of my patrons, and I'll give you a quick update on where the situation with me stands. As some of you know from the last video, I was laid off from my job thanks to the outbreak of COVID-19, making me a full-time YouTube guy by default. They said that I might get my job back when this is all over, but a guy doesn't get his hopes up when his job at a 1-year experimental retail facility is going on 4 years and hands him back pay and all accrued PTO. It's cool though, I actually had another job lined up anyway, and they've assured me that as soon as lockdown ends, they want me coming in. After the Resident Evil 4 video, I took that week to recharge and think about things, and here we are. I've made a post open to everyone on my Patreon if you guys want to see how I'm going to be handling this. I'm amazed at the boost in support I've received so far, and I cannot thank you all enough for choosing to help me even in these trying times. No matter what, I'm gonna be okay financially, as even before the outbreak, I was saving up money as a Get Out of Southern California fund, and on top of that, I was heavily minimizing my personal expenses in order to aid with that effort. While I'm sticking to my guns about not taking bad sponsors, I have to admit the temptation is out there. Just this week, I was given a shadowy offer to raid the trust of my viewers to legendary proportions to the tune of $400. That's certainly up from the last time they approached me about a month and a half ago for $120, and especially tempting as even though viewership is way up, ad rates are down thanks to the economy laying a massive egg. You might have noticed this yourself lately, as a large portion of the ads you're getting, if you're getting ads at all, are just a bunch of pretty-faced storytime vloggers being like, hey guys, make sure you stay inside with me because COVID-19 is like scary and bad. Which is in part because a lot of companies are pulling money for ads all across the board to stay afloat. I'm still saying no to these though, as no matter what, I know how terrible of a mobile game that certain game is, and I even found out I had a friend who got Skinner boxed out of a couple $100 from it. This anti-sponsor segment has gone on for long enough though, so please consider supporting me if you can, but rest assured, I'd rather go bankrupt with my dignity than go down as a cheap shill. And it isn't even gonna come to that. Now, let's get back to this video and talk about everyone's least favorite AAA publisher.
The sacrifice of the many is but pleasure for the few.
Alright, you all knew this was coming. Command & Conquer 4 is peak Electronic Arts executive meddling, and just about every conceivable bad thing that we don't like was tacked onto this game, and then some. For starters, it's an always online game, regardless if you're gonna play single player or multiplayer. You gotta make an EA account, or try to use your EA Origin account if you've been able to convince this game that Origin exists, because this game came out before EA decided to try making their own platform. And then, after a tedious server handshake, you're allowed to play the game you hopefully did not pay too much good money for. Because there's no excuse to buy this directly, just get it as part of the EA CNC bundle for like $20. As a saving grace of this was that you could do co-op missions, which let the brave souls who actually finished the game first let new players join up on their final mission lobbies so that other players wouldn't have to drudge through the whole game to see what happens. There are worse implications though, as this game is now a decade old and not exactly bustling with player activity. The servers don't have a lot of bandwidth, or say, if you're stuck in a situation where you have crappy internet, this game will disconnect mid-mission. If it does that, you'll still be able to keep playing for the rest of the map. However, your progress is nullified, as the game lost contact with you and doesn't have a way to ensure you didn't do some naughty thing like cheat your way through a mission. You'll also lose out on any XP you get. This is why I don't have the final cinematics for this game in my footage bank. I desynced midway through the final mission, and after a very tedious fight, and finishing the stupid thing they wanted me to do, instead of seeing the final cinematics of this game, I got kicked back to the main menu without any awards or progress. That was the point that I decided I had no will to play this game any further. There was also a pre-order exclusive mission because, of course, this is late OOZA, that's why. It was eventually added to everyone else's game for free after a minute, but this is the exact kind of envelope pushing crap that eventually came to a head with the augment your pre-order incident over at Squeenix. Now, let's talk about that thing I've been referencing for most of the video. Yes, you have to grind for XP to unlock your units in a real-time strategy game, and lordy is it grindy. I did the whole Nod campaign with exclusively Nod armies, yet I wasn't able to get the whole Nod army unlocked by the end of it. You get experience by running over little boxes of stuff, and I think from killing other dudes. I'm thinking this was some harebrained idea to get players to keep playing even after the short, frustrating campaigns, but geez, it was a bad one. I can think of a few places where I'd love to have RPG elements mixed in, but a real-time strategy game is certainly not one of them. Lastly, this game was very obviously designed to be a freemium mobile game first and foremost, a Command & Conquer game as a distant second. While EA did eventually pull that crap in 2018 with Rivals, it's still insulting to think they were trying to do this as early as 2009. Tiberian Twilight was ported straight to the iOS systems after a very short time, and like I said in the big Command & Conquer video, you couldn't help but notice that the UI in this game is very touch-friendly for a PC game. Like, you look like you could touch all the buttons, as if it was meant to be a mobile game in the first place. Well, guess what? It was. The same UI designer who screen grabbed parts of StarCraft 2's teaser cinematic for their mock-ups also had featured on their website mock-ups of the game being displayed on iPhones and iPads, as well as mock-ups for purchasable skin backs for your army units. Rather than get a proper final installment to the Tiberium timeline, we got a crappy mobile game that was hastily ported to PC before being hastily ported back to mobile. Well, if I talk about this anymore, my soul is going to die, so let's wrap this up. I guess it's just a sore spot that instead of a proper ending to the series, that interesting looking shooter that got cancelled called Tiberium, or even a second chance at a Generals game, we got this dumpster fire that not a single person involved with was happy about. As a ray of hope, it seems that EA is taking its property seriously again, as the Command & Conquer Tiberian Dawn and Red Alert remakes look pretty good. They brought in the old guard from Petroglyph, and what they've shown so far looks really up my alley. Also, as a side note, back in the day when the big Command & Conquer video was released, I got an email from Joe Cookin saying he liked the video, and I have to admit I actually spent much more time than I'm willing to admit trying to figure out how to give him a proper reply. I was a little starstruck, and eventually ended up abandoning it after a couple months, as I had no idea what to say. I was even going to check out a public fit as I saw they were going to do the Elephant Man, and I've always been a big sucker for stage effects, both makeup and set-wise. Like seriously, I looked up every scrap of footage there was of that one high school production of Alien, where they built the full-size Xenomorph, but I couldn't get the time to go to Las Vegas for a weekend. Oh well, maybe something interesting will come up after the lockdowns ended. Well, I guess now is better than never. So, Mr. Kukin, I hope you and yours are doing well in these trying times, and I thank you for your efforts in making FMV cinematics and helping to direct the story of Command & Conquer. Here's to us creative types writing this one out in our rooms and stockpiling new ideas for bigger and better works instead of toilet paper. That'll do her for today. Special thanks to $10 patrons Zola Sanera, Johan Carlson, McFluffers, and French Toast, as well as a hello and welcome to the new patrons since the last video: Peter Phillips, Basti, Joshua W. Schreiner, Chip Salzenberg, Chase T. Hopper, and Daniel. Welcome aboard. And also, as promised, since I couldn't record the shout out last time, here's a second $10 patron shout out to Elisa Nera, Johan Carlson, McFluffers, and French Toast. Thank you all so much for helping me make these videos, even when the going gets tough. The next video will be about an immersive sim that is the premier kicking simulator of all video games. So get your boots and spiky walls ready. In the meantime, stay safe, wash your hands, and enjoy this cat video. This is our saucy boy on a diet. He is so desperate for extra snacks, despite the fact that, like, for his own health, we're putting him on a restricted diet. He's like reaching under my computer tower thing, which also was made to keep him out in the first place, to grab extra kibbles that he knocked under it. At least I'm hoping he's starting to make progress now that, like, I'm home a lot. So, oh, there he goes. He just licks the bowl for snacks, like, between his feeding times. Like, I might give him, like, he's allowed 1/8 of a cup during the day, just because, like, we still got to restrict how much he takes in, because that's the other thing. He'll do whatever you want if he thinks he's going to get food. Look at your wobble. Dude, you're a wobbly boy. And I vacuumed not even half a week ago, like 3 days ago, and you've already messed everything up. Is vacuuming going to be like a daily occurrence while you rage because you're not getting all the snacks you want? Don't avoid me. Alright, that's enough bothering you. I'll let you out.